So we are at the point where I think everyone has been waiting for. One of the things about today, which I hope you all had the opportunity to take some of Mary's advice earlier, which was to kind of get out of our comfort zones, be apart from the office noise, the emails, the texts, the this and that. And I had the opportunity to do that back in June. I was lucky enough to go to a public relations conference in New York City where I met and watched Elizabeth in action for the first time. And she was so wonderful, and her message is so timely and so extraordinary that I really thought she'd make a great keynote for us today. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you now my friend, Elizabeth Edwards.
I'm using my mic. Thank you, Lisa. Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. How are we doing today? We're excited? Having a good time? This has been an amazing conference. Lisa and team, just kudos to you for all you've done. So I'm so excited to be here with you today. As Lisa mentioned, we met at a PR conference. I speak predominantly to people in public relations and marketing, but I feel so honored to be here today to share this with women business owners. Some of the women I have met in just the last couple of hours, the things you're doing, the way you're changing the world, just if you hear emotion in my voice, I'm just very honored to be here to share what it is that I do with all of you. So why are we here? Well, science says that the human ear can hear 10 octaves. That's what we're using right now. It's what you're listening to me today. But our minds hear so much more and take in so much more information as we're processing the world around us and making sense of messages and of things we hear. In fact, our unconscious mind, that which is beyond our regular awareness, is said to process 95% of the decisions that we make. 95%. Now, where this is important is the majority of our communication is directed to our conscious mind, that little tiny 5% up at the top. But what would happen to your outcomes, to your success, to your marketing and messaging if you were able to communicate to the entire 100%? That's what we're here to learn today. My life's work has been focused on understanding and uncovering the formula and the system and structure that underpins communication, and how to apply that structure to reach 100% of our minds, not 5%, not the 95%, but the totality of our mind. And that is what we refer, when you do that, to be speaking to the 11th octave, speaking to the part of our brain that hears and understands everything and is the core to our decision making. During my career, using what I'm going to teach you some of today, I have helped companies grow from positions of market insignificance to being market leaders, to selling hundreds of millions of products, and have helped companies be acquired, startups from anywhere from $7 million to $500 million. This works, and I'm very honored to share it with all of you today. Now, why did I get here? I went to school and did my undergraduate work at Pepperdine. Any other Pepperdine's? Go Waves? Nobody? Okay. Well, beautiful place still to be. And when it came time for me to stop staring at that beautiful ocean and declare a major, I knew I wanted to major and study and focus on communication, but I really wanted to also understand psychology. And what is it that makes our minds respond positively to that communication? But as I marched into the registrar's office all those years ago, I was very disappointed to learn that communication and psychology are completely separate fields. They do not intersect. They didn't then, and they still don't today. And I think that that's a missed opportunity. If we don't fully understand what's going on in our minds, processing everything that I'm saying, everything everyone hears when you communicate with them, are you going to be able to be as effective as you would if you were really engaging that entire mind? So after Pepperdine, I went on to my professional career. I worked at Boeing in the space division. This is back in the days when the International Space Station was still on the ground, and it was phenomenal to get to work next to it every day. Then I went to a little PR agency called Ogilvy. Anybody heard of them? I think they're one of the largest in the entire world. And worked in technology, PR predominantly and a lot with startups. How do we take something that is nothing and turn it into something that can sell for $500 million? And that was where my focus was. Then I took that experience and brought this to my own agency, Volume PR, that I've been running for the last 18 years and has been the proving ground where I continue to study all of the different elements that are what I thought was just psychology back in the days and how to integrate that into what we do. So behavioral science, neuroscience, cognitive science, these three areas I've been a perpetual student of my entire career. And how do we integrate the wisdom from these fields into the way that we execute public relations or marketing, internal comms, investor relations, social media posts, any form of communication from a company, an individual, a celebrity, whoever that may be, to the rest of the world. And we do this ultimately to build brands, increase sales, just overall increase your business and your position as a thought leader and your success. The reason we incorporate these elements is because in order to be successful with communication, you do need to be able to be persuasive. People need to be interested in what you have to say, find you relevant, find you compelling. Your communication needs to be able to establish and then build and increase trust, as well as, of course, diffusing crises is a very big part for all of my PR friends in the room and understanding our role in that. And when we do all of this, what we're effectively doing is deepening your connections with the market, your audiences, increasing revenue, but ultimately changing behavior. Because if you want someone to buy your purses as opposed to someone else's purses, that's a behavior change. So when I talk about behavior change, I want you to think about that in nuanced and small ways. What are the little behaviors I want them to do differently? I want them to read this whole article. That's a behavior, and as opposed to just the first 5 lines or so. I want people to stick with my content. I want them to share my social media posts. I want them to engage with me. I want them to forward my newsletter on to someone. How do I create communication that accomplishes these objectives? And this is really hard, really, really hard today because it's freaking noisy out there. Does anybody else notice this? It is so loud. It's hard to hear ourselves think half of the time because it is so noisy. In fact, they estimate that we hear about 50,000 marketing messages a day. Now, what is your brain supposed to do with 50,000 marketing messages in a day? I don't know about yours. Well, I do actually know about yours. It tunes it out. It's overwhelmed, and we can't take all of this in. Now, let's see. Part of the reason why we can't take all of this in, and it is so noisy, researchers have created this beautiful diagram here that we're looking at today that's called the Cognitive Bias Codex. It is so noisy out there and loud, you have manufactured in your brain 175 plus biases as to how you filter information. You think you're just hearing me talk, or you think you see a sign and you just have a reaction or response to it, but actually there's hundreds and hundreds of biases that we have been able to measure so far that are actually happening in your brain as you're trying to make sense of the world because there's too much communication, too many messages, and it's too freaking noisy. So let's look at this, for example. Here's just the different effects and things that exist to help us with the fact that there's too much information. So we know, for example, that if we see something that has changed in our environment, it's more likely to raise to our level of attention. We're more likely to notice. Part of our unconscious mind, that 95%, is constantly scanning to see if something is different. And if something is different, it notices that. So what this beautiful diagram for geeky people like me is showing you, it's all the different effects that have been measured just under the fact of we notice when something has changed. What are there? About 8 different biases that exist. So as a communication and marketing professional, when you understand all of these, we are more likely to develop communications that are more successful because they don't get in the way of all of these biases. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. How do you circumnavigate the things that we are all unconsciously putting up to help ourselves cope with the fact that we live in a phenomenally noisy world? Now, when you go to school to study communication, this is what they teach you. This is the model of communication. We have a sender, encoding, message, channel, receiver, decoding, feedback happens in there, and then there's a lot of noise, okay? Does everyone feel enlightened now? You know how to communicate successfully? No, right? No. What we are learning in school, what's being taught, is not helping us for the competition that we are all in. Because to be clear, in a world that is this noisy, you are in competition to be heard and understood. And to be clear, every day and everything you do, every post, every email, how are you being heard differently from everyone else and through all of that noise? To understand this a little more clearly, let's think about our two different minds, as I've been talking about. So we have what is referred to as our conscious brain. Now, scientists say we actually have about 70,000 thoughts every day. So those 50,000 messages, 70,000 thoughts, frankly, there's just a lot going on up in here. Anybody else feel that way, right? Validation, there is a lot in there, guys. But we can only actually hold on to about 6 thoughts for about 20 seconds. Conversely, our unconscious mind is the most powerful of our coping functions and mechanisms to deal with all this. Now, let's take a little test, okay? Nobody's gonna look at your paper, but I want you to just look at these words for about 20 seconds. And try to jot down, type into your phone, whatever it is, as many as you can remember when I make this disappear here. Let's see how many you can remember. And I'm not gonna stop talking the whole time either, because that's real life. So, those are pretty simple words, monosyllabic words. Let's take about 10 seconds till we see some pencils stop. And see how many we can remember. These are simple words, right? Should be easy peasy. All right, let's give it a test, okay? For those who played today, anyone have 5 or more? Good, we've got about 3. Anybody have 7 or more? No hands. They say if you have 9 or more, you're a genius. Anybody with 9? We had a 7 over here. Nice. Now, let's look at these words. Rock, bird, dirt. Are you communicating messages that are any harder than those words? Yeah, most of us are. But if we can't remember the word bird, how are people going to remember your message? Because I don't know about y'all, but this is how I feel every day. I am over-messaged, I am over-communicated to, I am over-engaged, over-stimulated. I cannot remember and keep track of any or all of this stuff. So, who loves psychology in the room? I love this, lots of hands. I'm a huge, as I shared with you, huge fan of psychology. Wanted to study this in school and combine and commingle it with communication. But what I learned in the last few years is that there's a lot of people saying psychology is broken. It's a thing called the replication crisis. What's happening is that as certain studies that have been done that maybe we did learn in school or learn through some capacity in our careers, some of those elements they're finding are not able to be replicated or reproduced nowadays. Some of them, yes, but some aren't. And there's an incredible organization out there called the Center for Open Science. Just as open source technology is technology code that is available to all to use, the concept from the Center for Open Science is let's create a model and a system for researchers to be able to conduct and re-look at some of these things that have been done in a different way than the traditional research mechanisms. So there's 100 different psychological studies that the Center for Open Science has redone in order to look at and see what really is true, where do we really fit with all of this today. It's a fascinating body of research. Another area of where all this knowledge and data is coming from is the field of nonconscious research. Anybody heard of nonconscious research before? This is such new stuff, but if you think about this, as the price of medical technologies and equipment have come down in the last 15 to 10 years, marketers, researchers, all different types of business professionals are now able to use that to teach us things about how our brains work and how we're processing and engaging with communication. So there's things from fMRIs or EEGs or where we'll hook you up and it'll just look at galvanic skin response. How does the skin temperature, your skin temperature, change when I expose you to a certain message or when you look at one website over another? These are things that your conscious mind can't tell me. But research is able to find the most amazing things that 95% of our brain is knowing and thinking and doing. Now, let's look at an example. Like this seems kind of like out here and ethereal. Let's make this make a little more sense. So, Does anybody dust? Right. Remember when Swiffer came out? And Swiffer's message was Swift it and forget it, right? Well, now what do you think happened if you were in charge of marketing for Pledge and everybody in the world was Swiffing it and forgetting it? What do you think happened to Pledge sales? Not so great, right? So if you're the head of marketing for Pledge, what are you going to do differently that you haven't done all of these years to market your product and communicate that to people differently? Well, they did non-conscious research. They brought a bunch of people in, and instead of saying, what motivates you to dust? What? Please, for the love of God, tell me. All we ever hear is companies coming over, the cat's footprints are walking through it, and I'm embarrassed, I have allergies, all these types of basic, like this is what I'm thinking is why I'm dusting. But when we don't ask the conscious brain, the thinking brain, why are you dusting? But we hook you up to all of these different things that are looking at that 95%, your unconscious, looking beyond what you can verbally tell me you're doing. What they found out is that at a deep level, we all tend to believe that wood is something that is alive and needs to be nourished and moisturized and protected. Does that sound a little accurate if you think about, do I care about my wood? Well, messages. Okay, so here's what Pledge used to look like. Anybody recognize this good old lemon clean Pledge? We love it. Staple. Now if you go to the store though, it doesn't look like this anymore. We have Pledge Beautify It, Pledge, actually what else? Revive It, and Clean It. And now look at the words here. Do you see the differences? It used to be all about the functions. It's lemon clean, dust, clean, and shine. Now it's beautify, enhancing polish, moisturizing oil, a conditions to look like new again. If you look at their ads now, one of the ads is a mother with boys, which I can relate to as a boy mom, climbing all over couches and how she uses it to protect and create a barrier and shield in between your home's items and life and children and things like that. Completely different message, and if Pledge had only looked at, why do you dust? None of this would have happened to their brand. None of these messages would have come about and would have changed. Another area where we are at the intersection of behavioral economics and communication is the book Nudge by Richard Thaler. This actually won the Nobel Prize a few years ago for this work. And what not just talking about and looking at is taking all the stuff I'm talking about, everything from behavioral science, cognitive science, and neuroscience. And what they found, and the way that they put it is, that if we can change choice architecture to make it easy for people, then we're able to not have to think about things, and we're able to change behavior. Now, there's a lot of big words in there. Has anybody heard of the words choice architecture? Or have you thought of yourself as a choice architect? Because congratulations, you all are actually choice architects. You're architecting and constructing the choices that people take. Do they reply to your email or not? Do they like your post or not? How they move through a web page? Which boxes do they click on? What things should they look at? I want to encourage you all to read this book for sure. But in the absence of that, think about yourself as an architect of choice. And how can I present information, again, with the goal of persuading and changing behavior and causing whatever the outcome is that is the goal of my communication? How do I do that with a nudge? The idea of a nudge being a very simple way for us to help encourage different behavior. Well, let's look at an example of a nudge. This is Goby. It's a big, giant wire contraption that lives, I believe this is on a beach in Australia. And it says, Goby is hungry, feed me plastic, is the sign. This is a beach that used to have significant problems with litter and pollution and dirt. And now kids run around on the beach constantly trying to fill and feed the fish because it's fun. This is an example of a nudge type of communication. Instead of a sign saying, pick up your dang trash, quit being such a litter bug, we can't stand you, we put this out in this art installation instead. Another simple example of a nudge, I love this one, is you're gonna fall, Elizabeth, be careful, right? It's not just a sign, but we have the little banana peel element in there. There's some visual components explaining to us what we're saying. Now, how many times have y'all been in a presentation with a mega urinal on the wall? Good. I hope that's my honor to own. All right. Do you know what we're seeing here? In Amsterdam, at the airport, they had a problem with the men's room getting a little messy. Now, I have 2 boys, so I understand men's rooms and bathrooms can get really messy with boys. And this is a real big problem, and we're looking at how can we use nudge to change things. So they got a sticker of a fly. Actually, the first time they did this, the gentleman who was doing this actually went and etched flies into the urinals. What do you think this did? Now, right. I'm so glad I don't have the job to be the one measuring this. But what they determined, they were able to decrease spillage, as they called it, by 80% by giving the fly. There's even now a website that does nothing but sell urinal fly stickers, just in case you're interested. They're available for all of us. Nudges are so powerful. Another nudge example, a grocery store. They wanted to get more people to go to the produce department. Instead of saying, come to the produce department, there's something on sale. That would be a traditional form of communication where you're trying to economically incentivize someone to do something. Come to the produce department because things are on sale. Instead, what they did is put in big green arrows all over the floors. Where do these green arrows lead? How many people do you think went to the produce department after they put in green arrows on the floor? Nearly every single person wanted to know where those arrows were leading. Another example of choice architecture. In a hospital cafeteria, they wanted to decrease, obviously, making bad food choices. It's a hospital. We want you to be healthy when you're eating in a hospital. But instead of using words, instead of speaking to the conscious mind, instead of saying, put down the soda, Cheryl, that's not going to help as much. So what they did is they used a traffic light system. Everything in the cafeteria got a dot, either red, yellow, or green, because we all universally understand red, yellow, and green. We know what they're trying to say to us. What's powerful is when you look at these numbers they didn't use a single freaking word, and look at how much they were able to change behavior. Of the red beverages, over 2 years, they decreased red beverages by 40%. That's huge. When you think about all they did was put up stickers in different colors. What are all of the tools available to you to communicate? It's not just your words. It's not just what you have to say. Do you really think about what is it that I'm trying to do with my communication? What's my goal? What behavior do I want to change? What do I want to influence or persuade? And how do you communicate that to people? You have so many tools available to you. Another thing that has come from all of this research is the understanding that, we all used to organize ourselves into B2B or B2C. I'm a business-to-business brand or a business-to-consumer brand. This is language we should throw out the window. And instead, what we should start thinking of is that we are all H to H. We are all human to human. Yes, I'm from a company. I own Volume Public Relations and 11th Octave. But right now, am I not Elizabeth Edwards speaking to all of you as other women and other professionals? We're humans. Everything we do is this way. If you write a social post as my business talking to your business, no one is going to pay attention to that social post. No one is going to care. When you can reach the human level of how you engage people and start really thinking about it that way, that every recipient of my message is a human being. Companies are nothing other than collections of human beings. So let's start speaking to people as humans. And there's so much media and research to support this. Brian Kramer is the gentleman who coined the term H to H, has a podcast, a lot of research, highly recommend following him. I think what's so beautiful is the way that GE put it when they were talking about the importance of our future and where we need to look in terms of where we're going. And that we have to really think about a more holistic level of engagement. We have to think about, yes, there's some art to our communication, but there's also this really powerful science. And as business owners and women in leadership, when we understand this and can apply this to how we message ourselves, our companies, how we talk to our kids and our spouses, it changes everything. Also incredibly critical to think about in this day and age is that perception is reality. When we're moving as quickly as we all are, and being inundated with, 50,000 messages a day or so, 50,000 marketing messages a day, and 70-some thousand thoughts, that's our brain on autopilot so much of the time. So whatever we perceive as reality, that's our reality. Now look, I love these pictures here. On the end, has anyone seen these before? On the end, is that an old woman or a young woman? I couldn't see the young woman for about 2 years, even when I was giving this presentation. The giveaway is right here. So this is in the old woman, that is her mouth. In the young woman, it is a necklace. Did you just hear all of those realities change? It's a beautiful sound. How about in the middle, though? This one's great because they're both right. When we stand on different sides of things, we can both be right and be seeing things that are very different. But what does that do to you if it's your message, your brand, your company? Do you want other people to be able to see things and create their own reality? Or do you want to be in charge of what people's realities are? Now let's learn a few keys. How do we speak to the 11th octave? How do we engage the totality of the mind instead of just the 5% that is conscious or just the 95% that is unconscious? How do we speak to the entire 100%? How do we engage that 11th octave where the entire mind is listening and interested in us? First rule, contrast. That's me, in case y'all can't tell. Business on the outside, party on the inside. Anybody else? Relate? Naturally, there's contrast, right? There's natural contrast in all of us. We show who we are to the world. We are here as professionals, but we have a personal side too, right? There's contrast within all of us. So how do we communicate? Contrast is one of the most powerful and quick ways to create understanding, because that 95% of your brain, it loves images and things that try to make that type of a point. This is such a powerful example from the World Wildlife Federation. Look at what we're saying here. What type of behavior are we trying to change? And you see all of that just in this simple image. When Whole Foods wanted to talk to the world and enter the conversation around climate change and the impact on our honeybees, they could have put out another press release like everybody else. We're Whole Foods. You're screwing up the food system. We're upset. Damn it, right? All kinds of things they could have messaged or said, but instead they used contrast effect. And they put out a release showing you one of their produce departments and what your produce choice looks like with bees and what your produce choice is like without bees. Anybody want some bees after saying this? All right, we don't like when our freedoms are taken away. That really pisses us off at a deep core level. So what's happening here is that your brain is saying contrast, and it's like, oh, holy crap, I get it at a whole deeper level than I ever really understood before, because whatever produce item you were looking at that mattered to you, you're noticing if it's there or not. And that might have been a different item for me, what I feed my kids versus what everyone else is buying. And so when we see something that we want taken away from us, a personal freedom gone, that's upsetting. And that motivates us to take more action and to change behavior. So I want you to think, as you're communicating about your company, your message, your brands, your products, how do you do this with contrast? Many different ways we can use both visual and written forms to communicate contrast, with or without, before and after, now and later, you versus others. So many different ways this comes into play. If you can't see the words, this is a contrast of before and after, or with and without. Here we see the shark's fin. It says horrifying. The one without is even more horrifying. Because where the hell did he go? And he's about to eat me. This one, be careful with contrast. All right, so Pepsi, being kind of funny, put this out. Can you guys read what it says there? It says, we wish you a scary Halloween, because they put a Coke thing on top of a Pepsi. Yeah, be careful, because then Coke came out with, everybody wants to be a hero. This example from Band-Aid, I think, is so gorgeous because it says so much. And not just because I'm a boy mom and I go through a lot of Band-Aids. But look at how this is showing. We're strong, we're durable. How many different things are you thinking about what this is saying about Band-Aid, and it's all unique to you, but it is the message that they want to communicate. We're just going to move on. Weight Watchers. Yeah, I thought that would be fun with this room. Capella University is a great example of how they're using it with their words, right? Live and learn, and showing pictures. What are other ways we can start to bring this into play that are maybe not at the level where we have multi-million-dollar advertising budgets? But there's so many ways that you can bring this into play. And think about contrast. This isn't a new concept, by the way. This is Dickens. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. Right? That's contrast. Shakespeare, so much of Shakespeare, he was one of the most beautiful contrast artists of our time. Or in quotes. Some of the things that are really memorable to us are actually very contrasting points if you go back and start looking at them. Now, number 2, next rule to engage that 11th octave. There was a study done at Harvard, very fascinating study, where there was a copy machine and a bunch of people in line for a copy machine. And so they took a woman, gave her a whole bunch of things to hold in her hands and to walk up to the copy machine and to ask to cut in line. And the goal of this research was to determine, would people let her cut in line if she used different language? And how much would they let her cut in line based on what she said? So when she walks up to the copy machine and simply says, with nothing else, may I use the Xerox machine? Can I cut in line? Period. How much do you think, what percentage do people let her go to the front of the line? 0. That's right. Get to the back, girl. No. I was really surprised. I think this maybe has something to do with peer pressure, but 60% of the time, folks let her cut. Right? Yay for us. We're nice people, okay? Felt a little better about humanity when I saw this, okay? But here's where things get really crazy, okay? So she does that with a whole bunch. Now she goes to a bunch and she asks, may I use the Xerox machine because I'm in a rush? Well, now what happened to that 60%? Everybody thinks it goes down. Why do you think it goes down? Because we're all in a rush. Yeah. Sorry, guys, no. 94% yes. Even crazier, control, she now goes and does this, but says, because I need to make copies, okay? It's a copy machine. That's all it does. She's still got a 93% yes. So what's your magic word? Your magic word is because. The reason? Anybody have kids? Your little kid version of yourself, I'm here to tell you, is still alive and well in your head. And she wants to know why. She's actually in there demanding a why all the freaking time. And when you supply that why to her or him and use the word because, you're more likely to be successful in your conversion. I love this example from Jimmy John's. If you start thinking about this now and understand the power of the word because, you will notice it in advertising and in so many different places where this is current Jimmy John's advertising, which is everything is just at the end. Because, sandwich. I mean, no other words needed. So think, really, are you supplying the why to people? Do your audiences understand why you're asking them to do something? Do your kids know why you're telling them to do what you're telling them to do? Your employees, your teammates, your audiences on social media, the people reading your newsletters, the employees being engaged by your talks, do they understand the why? Are you giving them the why in a unique way? You don't literally have to use the word because all the time. That would get really obnoxious. Please don't do that. But supply that why. Give people that reason. Create meaning and understanding, and we will be so much more successful and engaging in our communication. Last rule I'm going to teach you today, and key to speak to the 11th octave, is the concept of the speakeasy effect and fluency. Now, when we were in school, I don't know about all y'all, but when I would get a paper graded, it seemed the more $10 words that I used, the bigger I sounded, and the fancier I sounded, the better grade I would get, right? Because at school, we're there to learn how to be really smart and to communicate in this very sophisticated way. But actually, in the real world, where we have to write marketing messages and communication messages and social posts and things, if we do that, these are all of the mistakes that is actually making. in that it really turns people off to what we're saying. Think about the last time, not today, hopefully, that you heard someone smart speaking and that just went entirely over your head. And you weren't really interested or engaged and just kind of got on Facebook and started scrolling, right? Chances are this is what they were doing to you, using a lot of buzzwords, being very, very blah, blah, blah. This is something we can't afford to do with our communication because people tune us out and then never come back again. So what the speakeasy effect is, it shows us that there's a part of our mind that believes if words are complicated, they're bad. Anybody read the book that came out called Food Rules about 10 years ago? It said, beware of any food name that you can't pronounce, right? We all know that now. That's pretty common. Well, this actually applies in business and in the stock market and behavioral economics. They've been able to measure when we have what we call a high fluency stock symbol, it's more likely to perform well. Amazon, AMNZ. I know that's Amazon. Apple, I know that's Apple. But these things that I don't understand, they're not as fluent to me. They don't perform as well because I don't naturally get it in the same way that I can get the others. How about medications? These are all different medications, but what are the ones that have been marketed to all of us? Lunesta and Sonata. Aren't you feeling sleepy? As we talk about these lyrical words, these others are things for prostate medication and bone density and things that are not prime time topics. But think about the way that it's such lyrical to falling asleep and the use of those types of words. Well, let me read this to you. I want to give you an example of hearing it yourself, the comparison of difficult to easy content. A new era in enterprise computing has arrived with the advent of artificial intelligence. Our best-in-class solution delivers tremendous operational efficiencies and system performance improvements. Boom. Barf is actually more like it. What if we talked about this AI content instead by saying your new favorite workmate just arrived? She doesn't talk too much or play weird music. She supports your busy work as a form of invisible reality. These are both possible descriptions of Amy.x, which is a virtual assistant that is so smart I didn't even know I was talking to her. Side note for all of us ladies, there's also an Andrew.x because we should have male assistants. Just saying. So what's the difference here? The difficult content, this is seen as less shareable, less trustworthy. I can't understand you. Why would I be like, friends, look? As opposed to the other, when we are clear and simple and straightforward, we are seen as more trustworthy. Our content is more likely to be shared. I hope that this frees you a bit because I know that so many of us think, I don't sound smart enough. I don't sound polished enough. It's not all fancied up enough. And the fact is that's not really what people want. They want you to speak to them as a human. They want you to relate and be real. And we can do that when we start getting more simple in our communication. I want to show you this example that came out a couple of years ago from KFC in the UK. They had a PR crisis where they switched to a new chicken supplier in the UK. And one day, that chicken supplier just didn't deliver any chicken. So none of the KFCs in the UK had any chicken. Now, if you're in charge of PR, how would you handle this? You can get out there and you can talk about the damn suppliers and how they screwed everything up, but does that really help anything? No, it doesn't. It actually just alienates that relationship. It creates all types of problems. But let's see. What have we talked about today? We've talked about fluency, using really easy to understand words and terms. And we talked about contrast. That's a really powerful one, right? Taking something that people are used to seeing and making it a little bit different. And it gets our attention, and it makes us laugh. So, the copy just says, we're sorry. A chicken restaurant without chicken. It's not ideal. Here's what I want you to think about and take home around fluency and content. What are some of the statements that you can start making that are easy to repeat because those are the most believable? There's so many different statements going around in our world right now. I want you to think what's authentic to you, to your brand. And what are the easily repeatable statements you want to make about your company, about what you're doing? But also, what are the easily repeatable statements that the world might want to repeat, that the world might want to share, that people like me might want to put on a slide and share with the world? It's not going to be a message that is beladen with $10 words. It's going to be something that's real and that's human. Our leaders in the past used to do this really well. So many of the statements and quotes, when you're looking for things that are inspirational, they're not from the last decade or two. We need to get back to thinking about how to speak and communicate, maybe in a little less of a form, but one that is more intentional and more successful because of that. And I selected these quotes because what you're seeing actually here too is contrast. Do you notice that? We don't have to fear fear. We have to fear itself. This is contrast for you. If you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for anything. What is your message? What do you have to say that you can say in simplified human terms so that you reach the highest levels of success professionally that you can, so that your business achieves all of the heights that are possible for your business? Because this is what our communication has the power to do. And with that, I leave you with my statement. If communication is an art, then it's science that holds that paintbrush. Thank you all so much. Your time.